So it's Monday, it's day 5 of the America's Cup, and the schools are back and a lot of people are back at work as well, which means it's just a little bit quieter, as you can see around here today. But there's still plenty of pressure around the whole event, and certainly on the teams. After all, there's still 3 apiece. And the interesting thing is that the weather forecast for today, as Ian Murray told us at his morning weather briefing, is for about 9 to 13 knots. So it's sort of still in the area of the crossover between the 2 teams. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens today. So it's quite easy to get hot and bothered at the prospect of this. It's still pretty hot here too. So what better a thing to do than to have a little post-lunchtime dip before the racing to spruce up. Anyway, I'm off for my chat appointment with Freddie, and we'll find out what he's got to say. Now, you may have noticed we've chosen to go somewhere that doesn't serve food, mainly because when I was editing the piece late at night, it made me so hungry looking at all those fresh fish in the background. I thought we need a change of pace. So here we are, but we've got a nice view out towards where the racing is. We can see the boats. Look at that flotilla actually already heading out there onto the race course for another day. And today's forecast, Freddie, looks quite good, doesn't it? I mean, yesterday we had no racing because we had to hang around for the breeze. I just wonder, I mean, you know, anybody who's raced at any kind of regatta will be familiar with hanging around waiting for the breeze. It's quite hard work, but how much harder is it when there's this much pressure riding on it?
There's 2 sides to yesterday, I think, if I put my racing hat on. There's that balance of staying ready to go at any given moment. You're on a 5-minute rolling cycle where Ian Murray is looking at the average wind speed. And if it drops below 6.5, that 5-minute clock resets. So you're basically on a 5-minute rolling, ready to go. He also chucked some longer postponements in there, so you could fully decompress. But staying at that state of ready to go at any given moment is quite hard. But I actually reckon deep down, both crews were probably fairly happy to come up for air a little bit. And at sort of 5 o'clock, when it was obvious to everyone on the water that it was unlikely to happen, you could surely see a change in body language on the guys on the boat. They were laying around and having a drink and having a laugh, so might just have lifted the pressure off them for 24 hours anyway.
Do you think that would have I mean, I can see that could be a good thing, but maybe it could be a bad thing as well. I mean, is there the risk that we keep hearing this expression momentum in this cup? Is there a risk that you lose momentum? Well,
no one's got the momentum to start with, so I don't think there's any risk of that. Now, I think all in all, as a sailing team guy, you'd be pretty happy to have a day where the world stopped and you could have a breath. But obviously, that's not the case today. We're going to be racing.
Actually, one other thing on that, and that was interesting that Francesco Bruni mentioned in one of the interviews that was done yesterday. He said it's not so bad because actually we're only looking at a 2-hour window. Of course, in the old days, it was like all day you'd be sitting out there, a lot more stressful.
Right. No, I mean there's a heap of pressure on the meteo guys. You live and die by the wind forecast, particularly on your jib selection. It's pretty easy when you're at the bottom of the wind range. You know you're going to be on the J1, but the weather guys are certainly earning their money and are racing through the Ram Robinson in the Prada Cup. That's the most important email of the day. When Juan Villa would drop the email in at 6:30 in the morning, that's what would wake you up, and you would sit there and read it and pick it apart, and you knew that that's what you were going to live and die by.
Interesting. Now, I mean, talking about forecast, just broadly speaking over the next few days, it doesn't look like there's anything in the forecast that suggests we're going to get sort of high team. Now, that must be a worry for the Kiwis.
Yeah, potentially. Today we're down on course E, and I like that course selection. We're going to see around 10 knots today, and we'd have seen 10 knots on course A, and we'd have seen 10 knots on course E. I like the fact we're going to course E because out of this easterly direction, Waiheke, the big island just off Auckland, is dead upwind of the race course. And if he shifts it a little bit to the right, closer into the lee of Waiheke, we could see some shifty stuff. And I think we need to see some shifty stuff to open up some overtaking lanes, in all honesty.
The great irony of all of this is that we're forever as sailors and as commentators, we're forever looking for an even course, a course that's got a dead upwind leg with a line set square and everything else. And now it feels like everybody's gagging for anything that isn't even, because we know what, it's so hard to get an edge. It's a bizarre situation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. I personally love Course C. That's where we had our great victories throughout January. It's a great fun stadium racing course. I hope we get on there in the Cup in this cycle. But Course C's good. You do have land mass above the windward mark, and as we know, having a bit of land to shake things up in terms of the shiftiness of the breeze, I think will make it more exciting.
Now, tell us a bit about, because you've been here lots of times in the sense that you've raced in races that really count, and you've had a big debrief afterwards. What happens in a team debrief when you get back? When does it start? Does it start on the boat, on the tow back? Does it start when you've got ashore? What happens?
I can only talk about my personal experience. Whether the day's good or bad, the tow back in is quite a nice time just to stop and individually gather your own thoughts, think about what you personally did well or not so well on that race day, and then just kind of take a bit of distance, take a bit of perspective off the race day and get your thoughts together. By the time you hit the dock, the performance analysis guys, because of the live data stream off the boat, have really got the performance stuff nailed down. So you're actually sitting down in a room sort of an hour after you've hit the dock, and then it, like any other sailing team, like whether you're sailing at the Oppie Nationals or sailing in the America's Cup, you break it down into the areas. You look at the speed loop, you look at the performance, you look at the tactics, and you bring it all together. Now, not all parts of the team need to sit in the technical side of the stuff. As a grinder, I wouldn't go and sit necessarily in all the foil stuff, and they wouldn't come and sit in the afterguard wouldn't necessarily come and sit in on all our boat handling stuff. But we make sure that before we leave the base that night, we have had 15-20 minutes as a wider group, and you've had half an hour in your smaller group as well. And it just sets the tone for the next day, so you can put it to bed.
And typically it's going to be at least an hour's worth of your time, I guess.
Yeah, at least an hour. At least an hour, you're half an hour with your smaller group, be it speed loop, boat handling loop, tactical loop. But the most important 15 minutes is to sit as a wider team with key members of the design team involved and summarise the day and capture the day, and then put a full stop on it, take your learnings, and then move on to the next day. You can't go to sleep thinking about it.
Right. Why?
Well, it just keeps you up. You've got to close it, good or bad, because you can be buzzing or you could be really annoyed with how you sailed, but you've got to try and shut the book on that day before you go to bed, get a good night's sleep, and then tomorrow's another day.
How often do you find that in the debrief you see stuff that you either didn't see at the time or that has now changed your view on what you thought had happened at the time?
As a grinder, and the further forward you get in these boats, the more in the trenches you'd be. Sometimes I'm watching the race for the first time, and what you think happens in your head didn't happen. Now we have the tactical displays that show us where we are on the boundaries, and that's a great asset for us. But you don't know where the other boat is unless you see him. Now, if I'm poking my head up and looking at where the other boat is, my head's in the wind, so I try not to do that. I always try and watch the racing again that night. But that's it. Like, you're going to bed at 10 o'clock having had the debrief, watch the racing, and then you've got to put the full stop on the day because the next day is more important. And
how much difference do you, I mean, obviously this is a bit of a dumb question in a way, because if it didn't make a difference you wouldn't do it, but how powerful a part of the day is that in changing a team's fortune? So if someone comes off the water today and they're facing 2 losses,
it's absolutely everything, and it's the fortitude, it's the character, it's the togetherness of the team, and where weaker teams could crack and the head could go down, you can't let that happen. Like, you're working for 4 years, so if a team comes 2-0 in today and it's the moving day against the way they wanted it, it's the biggest debrief they'll have in this America's Cup tonight. I think one thing for sure, if you lose the first race today, and Team New Zealand have bounced back very well on race day 2 and race day 3, having lost the first race, if you lose the first race today, the pressure on that second race is huge.
And that on Luna Rossa, I'd suggest, is actually where Jimmy Spithill for all of his talents. Clearly he's talented in so many other areas, but one of the things he's really good at is you put him under pressure, and he's the last one to buckle, isn't he? He's the guy who's going to provide the solid centre for that team.
Seen everything, seen it all before in America's Cup matches.
Well, let's go and see it again.
Yeah, can't wait.
Thanks, Freddie. Cheers a lot. Cheers a lot. What does cheers a lot mean? So that's what we thought at the beginning of the day. Here's how it panned out in the end. 3 days in, 3 wins apiece. One question: could the deadlock be broken? More breeze was forecast, but it was shifty too. Perfect for passing. The crews knew it, and so did the crowds. It may have been a Monday, but you'd be hard-pressed to tell. At the start, Luna Rossa rolled over the Kiwis. And by gate 1 they led. But letting the Kiwis get away after gate 2 cost them dearly. The defenders had broken through. Their foot was to the floor as they smoked their way to a win. Next, a Kiwi consolidation or an Italian comeback. The breeze was lighter. Luna Rossa won the start, along with the first leg, but it was close, until a mistake by the Kiwis saw them trail by 4 minutes. An Italian win was surely in the bag, until they too tripped up at gate 3.
Massive levitation there, boys, on that one.
Falling off the foils, they were stuck, dead in the water, unable to fly, as the Kiwis came charging back into the race. They kept on their foils, kept their composure, and kept their winning streak for the day. The Italians had won both starts, they had led both races, and lost out both times. The defenders now led 5-3, and it was clear where the pressure now lay.